Zina spun on the polished floor of the wedding hall, her new dress glittering under the lights as cheers erupted all around her. The music was loud, drums pounding through the air, but there was something odd in the crowd's expressions. Faces that had been smiling suddenly stiffened, noses wrinkling, eyes widening. Zina froze mid-step, her laughter caught in her throat. A strange, overwhelming smell hit her. Something was horribly wrong. She looked down, her heart thudding and panic rippled through her chest. She had spent months preparing for this day, months of anticipation, and everything had to be perfect. Every eye had to be on her. And for a moment it was. The applause, the gifts, the whispers of admiration, they all came rushing back to her, making her feel invincible. But now something had gone horribly wrong. It hadn't always been like this for Zina. In Ikoli, her village, beauty wasn't just admired, it was currency. Women with curves were celebrated, adored, and practically elevated to royalty. They received gifts from men, protection from the elders, and a social status that others could only dream of. Curvy women were in control, and slim girls like Zina had always been marginalized. But Zina hadn't always been slim. When she was a child, she had been plump and cheerful, the kind of girl who made friends effortlessly. Her laughter could brighten a room, and her body reflected the village ideal. Round hips, prominent backside, and a cheerful, bouncy energy that made her the centerpiece of every gathering. But as she grew, her body changed. She became slim, too slim to attract the same attention. Friends drifted away. The curvy queens laughed and flirted, while Zina was relegated to the sidelines, fetching water and helping in kitchens, her presence acknowledged only when necessary. Her mother, Mama Ada, had watched helplessly as Zina's social standing eroded. She worried constantly, whispering advice that fell on deaf ears. "Don't let them see you like this, Zina. You need to stand out. You need to be noticed." But how? Zina had tried everything, dancing more, smiling wider, dressing in the most flattering colors, but nothing restored the admiration she had once commanded. It was Kofi, her childhood friend, who had offered a dangerous solution. "There's a way, Zina," he had said one evening, leaning close in the dim light of his small chemist shop. "A procedure, Brazilian butt lift. It'll make you the woman everyone admires. You'll be the curvy queen again." Zina had hesitated. Kofi had been her confidant, her ally, the one person who bridged the gap between the traditions of Ikoli and the modern world. But a procedure? It felt extreme. She had stared at his eager, expectant face, and then she had imagined herself at a wedding, all eyes on her, the admiration she craved overwhelming. That night, she had made up her mind. Selling her family land had been a difficult decision, one filled with guilt and second-guessing. But Zina was desperate. She had traveled to the city, a month-long stay in the hospital, waking every morning to see her reflection slowly morph into what she had dreamed of. Slim waist, enormous posterior, curves exaggerated yet balanced, the kind that made heads turn on the street. She had been cautious at first, afraid of the gossip, of disaster, but each compliment and gaze had bolstered her confidence. By the time she returned to Ikoli, she had become a sensation. And now, in the center of the wedding hall, she was finally getting the recognition she had longed for. Men leaned closer to offer gifts, married men whispered admiration she couldn't quite ignore, and women, some resentful, some awestruck, stared in envy. She had become everything she had ever wanted. But then came the smell. It started faintly, almost imperceptible, but it grew quickly, spreading through the crowd. Eyes widened in horror. Mothers clutched children, men stepped back, whispers turning into murmurs of disgust. Zina's mind raced. Her heartbeat was deafening. What had gone wrong? "Kofi," she whispered under her breath, panic thick in her throat. What is happening?" The memory of his warnings, spoken months ago in a casual, almost playful tone, came back. "You have to be careful, Zina. If anything goes wrong." He had trailed off, letting the unspoken risk hang in the air. She had laughed then, thinking him overly cautious. Now, she wished she had listened. She tried to move, to escape the hall without drawing attention, but the crowd had already noticed. People were pointing, some covering their noses, others whispering loudly enough that she could hear the words. "It smells like..." "Oh my God. Didn't she?" Zina's cheeks burned. Humiliation wrapped around her like a vice, making her limbs heavy. She wanted to run, to disappear, to undo every decision that had led her here. All the months of planning, all the dreams of admiration had collapsed in a horrifying moment. Her thoughts turned back to her childhood, to when beauty had been simple, when laughter had been enough, when she had been loved for who she was rather than how her body looked. She had chased approval through extremes, and the consequences were now unfolding with cruel clarity. A young girl in the crowd, one of the slim sisters, whispered, "She's ruined herself. Why did she even try?" Others nodded, faces cruel and judgmental. Even the curvy queens looked uneasy, unsure whether to comfort her or turn away, wary of being associated with disaster. The music faltered. The drums beat on, but the joyous rhythm of the wedding was gone, replaced by murmurs, gasps, and the sharp scent that seemed impossible to ignore. Zina tried to keep her head high, to maintain composure, but every movement reminded her of the catastrophe. "Someone, help me," she stammered, voice trembling. Her words fell on deaf ears. Everyone's attention was on the spectacle, the dramatic fall from grace that no one could look away from. She remembered Kofi's face, the earnest smile, the promises of admiration and status. And now, betrayal. He had warned her, yet she had trusted him, sold her land, risked everything. The wedding, the community, the very identity she had tried to reclaim. It all felt like it had been ripped away in one humiliating instant. Zina fled. Her dress swirled around her, glittering fabric catching the light, but no one cheered anymore. People recoiled, whispered, laughed, and gasped, the energy that had lifted her moments ago now crushing her. Outside the hall, she stumbled, panting, tears mingling with sweat on her cheeks. Her heart ached with shame, but also a strange, bitter understanding. The pursuit of approval, of recognition, had cost her more than she had anticipated. Even as she ran, she could hear the villagers talking behind her, their voices carrying across the courtyard. Remember the wedding day, the smell, the curvy queen undone. A cruel nickname began forming in the whispers, Smelly Queen. She tried to push it away, tried to tell herself it didn't matter, but deep down, she knew E. coli would never let her forget. Comment below if you've ever done something just to fit in, and it backfired. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more shocking stories from E. coli. Flashbacks of her journey to the city kept playing in Zina's mind as she sank onto the curb outside the wedding hall. The excitement, the anticipation, the months of waiting, all of it felt like a cruel joke now. She had trusted Kofi, her childhood friend, to guide her safely through this path. "You'll be E. coli's curvy queen again," he had promised. Voice gentle, eyes bright with reassurance. And he had delivered. But not the way she had hoped. Zina could still remember the first time she saw herself after the procedure. Her reflection had stunned her. Her waist was tiny, impossibly slim, and her hips and backside were round, exaggerated, perfect for the village's obsession. She had twirled in front of the mirror, delight coursing through her veins. For the first time in years, she felt powerful. She felt admired. She felt unstoppable. Returning to Akoli had been a triumph. The moment she stepped off the bus, villagers had paused, staring openly. People whispered in awe, mouths forming shapes of envy and disbelief. "It's her! Zina, she did it!" The Curvy Queens Association had received her with a mix of curiosity and cautious admiration. Some clapped her on the back, some evaluated her suspiciously, but the message was clear. Zina was no longer a slim girl left on the sidelines. She had claimed her space, and the village had noticed. Yet even amid admiration, Zina couldn't ignore the tension she felt with the Slim Sisters circle. They had been her friends once, girls who laughed with her, shared secrets and dreams in the shadowed corners of the village. Now they looked at her differently. Envy, disbelief, and a subtle accusation shone in their eyes. They whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, "Is it really her, or just the fake curves?" Their doubts gnawed at her pride, a reminder that admiration could be fragile, borrowed from a moment rather than earned. "Zina?" Kofi had called when she returned to her family home. "You did it. You're magnificent." His excitement had been genuine, but there had been a flicker in his eyes, the tiniest hint of worry. "Just don't overdo it," he added quickly, as if speaking to a child. "Overdo it?" She had laughed, spinning to show him her figure. "Kofi, I'm perfect. E. coli won't know what hit them." He had smiled, uneasy. "Just be careful. There are always risks. The body doesn't forget its limits." Zina had waved him off. Risks were for people afraid of life, afraid of standing out. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. She wanted to reclaim everything she had lost: admiration, love, attention, and above all, power. Weeks passed, and Zina's life had transformed. Gifts arrived from admirers, some bold enough to declare their intentions. Men approached her with smiles, eyes lingering longer than was appropriate. Even married men seemed drawn to her, caught between social boundaries and the allure of her body. Every glance, every whisper, fueled the fire inside her, reminding her that she had finally become the woman she wanted to be. But the social elevation came with costs. Old friends avoided her. Slim sisters no longer laughed when she approached. Conversations she had once shared were now awkward and clipped, replaced with stilted politeness or veiled criticism. She felt the sharp edge of betrayal in every interaction, and yet she told herself it was worth it. Approval, attention, power, they mattered more than friendships, didn't they? Mama Ada watched her daughter navigate this delicate terrain with a worried heart. She had been happy to see Zina confident again, walking tall and commanding attention. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something precarious hovered over her. "Remember, Zina," she had warned softly one evening, "what they admire today can humiliate you tomorrow. Be careful with what you chase." Zina had brushed it off, impatient with caution. She was finally free from the limitations of her past, finally in control. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let fear dictate her life now. The day of the wedding came, and everything had to be perfect. Zina had spent hours preparing. Her dress, her makeup, the way she moved. She had been the focus of photographers and curious villagers alike, their eyes tracing every curve, every movement. She felt their attention like a warm tide, lifting her higher and higher. The wedding hall was a swirl of color, music, and movement. The drums echoed through the air, the scent of flowers and cooking spices mingling with the nervous energy of hundreds of guests. Zina moved through it all with the grace of a queen, smiles and waves returning in kind. For a brief, shining moment, everything felt exactly as she had dreamed. Then it happened. It started as a faint, almost imperceptible odor. Zina didn't notice it at first, too caught up in her joy. But soon the people around her began to wrinkle their noses, whispering, pulling away. The smell grew stronger, sharp and unmistakable, filling the space like smoke. Confused, Zina glanced down, panic prickling at her skin. "Kofi," she whispered, fear choking her voice. What's happening?" A murmur ran through the crowd, and the music faltered. Guests glanced at one another, faces contorting in disgust, confusion, and disbelief. Zina felt every eye on her, their judgment burning hotter than the shame she had carried for years. The sound of whispers pierced the chaos. "Didn't she? It smells horrible. Oh my God." Zina's heart raced. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to escape the eyes of everyone she had longed to impress. She had chased admiration, attention, and status, and now it mocked her in the cruelest way imaginable. People began stepping back, covering noses, moving away in waves. The once adoring crowd became a sea of judgment. Even the curvy queens, who had welcomed her with tentative admiration, looked hesitant, unsure if they should stay close or distance themselves from disaster. "Someone, help me." Zina stammered, tears blurring her vision. She stumbled toward the side exit, trying to keep her dignity, but every step reminded her that the admiration she had worked so hard for was slipping away, replaced by humiliation. The Slim Sisters circle, who had once been her friends, now stared openly, their expressions a mix of shock and smug satisfaction. "She's ruined herself," one whispered. "She should have known better." The weight of the moment crashed over Zina, and she could feel every inch of her carefully crafted persona collapsing. The months of preparation, the city procedure, the sacrifices, it was all meaningless now. Outside in the fresh air, she collapsed onto the curb, gasping, trying to catch her breath. Her dress shimmered in the sunlight, but it offered no comfort. She had gained attention, status, and admiration, but at what cost? The villagers would remember this moment, and Zina knew it. A nickname was already forming in the whispers: Smelly Queen. It stung more than any insult ever had, a mark of failure permanently etched into her reputation. Zina stayed on the curb long after the crowd had dispersed, the echo of whispers and shocked gasps still ringing in her ears. Her chest heaved, tears streaking down her cheeks, and the reality of the humiliation pressed down on her like a heavy stone. All the months of sacrifice, all the risks she had taken, they had ended in this nightmare. She remembered Kofi's warnings, the tiny hint of doubt in his eyes when he had first promised her the procedure would be safe. "The body doesn't forget its limits, Zina," he had said. She had laughed then, thinking him overly cautious, too careful, too fearful. But now she wished she had listened. Every glance at the fleeing guests reminded her of her mistake, and every murmur whispered through the courtyard cut her deeper than any blade. Her phone buzzed violently in her bag, messages flooding in from the city, friends, and distant relatives who had heard the news. Some expressed concern, some mockery, and a few offered advice that felt hollow. Zina ignored them all, burying her face in her hands. For the first time in months, she felt powerless, vulnerable, exposed. Weeks passed, and life in Ecoli became a daily battle. Every corner held reminders of the wedding disaster. The children she had once played with pointed and whispered. Women who had once envied her now avoided her, speaking only in hushed tones when she walked by. Even men who had fawned over her curves now crossed the street to avoid her gaze. Her body, once a tool of admiration, had become a weapon of ridicule. Mama Ada tried to comfort her, but even her words were tinged with sorrow. "Zina, my daughter, the village will forgive eventually, but some wounds take time to heal. You must forgive yourself first." Zina nodded, though forgiveness felt impossible. She had wanted recognition, acceptance, love, but at what cost? She had gambled with her self-worth, and the village had called her bluff. The nickname, Smelly Queen, stuck like glue to her reputation. Every time she heard it whispered, her stomach twisted with a mix of shame and anger. Even Kofi, who had been her guide and friend, became a source of quiet tension. He visited her daily, his eyes anxious, apologies in his voice. "I told you there were risks," he reminded her one afternoon, sitting across from her in her small room. "I warned you, Zina. I never wanted this to happen." "I trusted you," she snapped, the pain raw in her voice. "I believed in you. You promised me. You promised I'd be admired, respected, and look at me now." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Kofi reached out, hesitating before placing a hand on hers. "I didn't lie, Zina. I didn't foresee this. I thought it would be different. I wanted you to have what you deserved." Zina shook her head. "What I deserved? I deserved to be happy, to be celebrated, not humiliated. You made me think I could buy respect, but it doesn't work that way. Not here. Not in Ecoli." The village gossip didn't stop. Every day brought new whispers, rumors, and snide jokes. Even the curvy queens, who had once admired her transformation, now treated her with cautious distance. Their admiration had been conditional, built on her body, and now that illusion had shattered, so had her social connections. Desperation led Zina to consider drastic measures. She returned to the city to consult doctors about correcting the BBL, hoping to salvage what she could of her reputation. The procedures were painful, lengthy, and costly, but she endured them, driven by the desire to reclaim even a fragment of the respect she had lost. Each day in the hospital, she confronted her choices, reflecting on the path that had led her here. She thought often of the Slim Sisters circle, those friends who had quietly supported her before she chased the curvy queen's ideal. She remembered their laughter, their kindness, the way they had believed in her without judgment. Slowly, she reached out, apologizing for the way she had abandoned them in pursuit of approval. Some accepted her gestures, some remained wary, and some didn't respond at all. But it was a start, a small patch in the tapestry of her fractured life. Returning to Ecoli after the hospital procedures was like stepping into a world both familiar and hostile. The streets were the same, the market still alive with chatter, but every glance Zina received felt heavy with judgment. The nickname Smelly Queen had spread beyond the wedding hall, whispered in every corner, carried by every villager who remembered that infamous day. She moved through it all with careful composure, walking taller, head held high, despite the stares and muttered remarks. Each step was a small act of defiance, a declaration that she would not let shame define her. Yet, inside her heart throbbed with the memory of humiliation, a constant reminder that appearances could only get one so far. The curvy queens still eyed her cautiously. Some were curious about her resilience, others wary of being associated with her perceived failure. Zina chose neither anger nor revenge. She focused instead on reclaiming her dignity in quiet, deliberate ways. She started helping girls who were marginalized, teaching them the value of self-respect and the dangers of chasing societal approval blindly. One day, she found herself sitting with a small group of slim sisters. Their faces were a mixture of surprise and guarded curiosity. "We heard about everything," one whispered. "We weren't sure if you'd ever come back." Zina smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried both sorrow and understanding. "I had to face it," she said. "I needed to understand that approval isn't given by others. It's built inside. You all believed in me when no one else did, and I lost sight of that." There was a pause, heavy with tension and unsaid emotions. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. A few reached forward to touch her hands, tentative but genuine. Forgiveness was not immediate, but it began to root itself in small gestures, tiny acts of reconciliation that hinted at healing. Even Kofi, her ever-watchful companion, stayed by her side. "I'm sorry for pushing you," he admitted quietly one evening. "I only wanted to help you shine, but I didn't understand the cost." Zina shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Help me? You made me think admiration was something I could buy with a body. You didn't understand that it could all collapse in a second." Her voice softened. "But I can't blame you entirely. I wanted it too badly. I needed it too badly. I made the choices." The village, as a whole, continued to murmur about her. The nickname persisted, and some jokes never faded. Yet Zina found a strange strength in this persistence. The world could label her, mock her, or laugh at her missteps. But she could also choose what defined her from within. Her experience had been a brutal lesson in the fragility of appearances, and she vowed never to let the pursuit of approval dictate her life again. Months passed, and Zina's focus shifted. She became more active in her community, supporting girls who faced pressure to conform to impossible beauty standards. She spoke candidly about her journey, the mistakes she had made, and the cost of chasing admiration through artificial means. People began to listen, some with curiosity, some with skepticism, but slowly, a new respect took root. Even though the wedding disaster was a memory etched into Ikoli's communal consciousness, Zina's resilience began to outshine it. Her story became less about humiliation and more about growth, about learning from mistakes, and about finding self-worth beyond the gaze of others. One afternoon, as she walked through the village square, she saw a young girl staring at her with wide, curious eyes. The girl hesitated, then asked softly, "Are you the smelly queen?" Zina knelt down, her smile warm and calm. "I am," she said, "and I made a lot of mistakes. But I learned that what matters most isn't what people think of you, it's how you think of yourself. You have to be your own queen first." The girl's eyes widened, absorbing the words, and Zina felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps, through her mistakes and her journey, she could help others avoid the pitfalls she had faced. Perhaps, through her story, the village could slowly learn to value more than appearances. Even though some would never forget the scandal, Zina had reclaimed her narrative. She no longer sought validation from the crowd, no longer measured her worth by curves or attention. She had discovered that true power came from authenticity, resilience, and the ability to forgive herself. At night, she sometimes remembered the wedding hall, the cheers, the stench, the panic. But now, those memories carried lessons instead of shame. She had faced public humiliation, survived it, and emerged stronger. The world had judged her, laughed at her, and labeled her, but she had also learned, grown, and reclaimed control over her life. And so Zina continued, a woman transformed not by admiration or envy, but by experience, courage, and wisdom. Ikoli would remember the smelly queen, but she would remember something far more important. The day she learned to stand tall, to value herself, and to rise above the fleeting approval of others. Zina's story is shocking, yes, but it's also a lesson. What would you have done in her place? Comment below, like this video if it moved you, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories from Ikoli. Thanks for watching.